Hi. Over the next 2 years, all of us are going to need to know what one of these are. And it's not a remote to electronic device. It's going to be a remote that is going to be connected to the internal workings of each one of our minds and our souls. You know, fight, flight, fear, or faint, these are basic stress responses that all humans and animals feel. And it is part of our primal evolutionary development, part of the brain that is the amygdala, which is the basic elemental brain. And it sends signals to something called the hypothalamus that triggers off all those fear symptoms like nervousness, high blood pressure, sweating, and that feeling of being gripped by fear. And when that happens, it shuts off the thinking, the rational part of your brain. And as a result, it's very difficult to think in a rational way. So think of the remote as a connection that we have, that's self-control. Unlike children, they don't have quite the maturity to be able to control that basic brain, and we have that ability. So what I'd like to tell you about is fear can be a very, very dangerous thing to let fester. Crisis and adversity that all of us are facing at the moment. There was a very famous quote by someone who said that in times of crisis and adversity is the time that you get to know yourself the best. And George Washington also said, when you are facing the greatest fear and challenge, fall back on yourself. Fall back on what you know. And I feel that that is going to be an important thing to think about over the next 2 years. A lot of people are putting their lives on hold. They're pushing that pause button. And what I would ask is, what are they waiting for? We know that over the next 2 years, that it's going to take a lot longer for South Africa to develop herd immunity. I was watching a television interview by Professor Mardi. Is a professor of infectious diseases, and in that first lockdown gave a lot of advice to the government on infections and COVID. I actually spent some time working with him at Baragwanath Hospital. He was busy doing his PhD at the time, and I was a junior registrar, and a very, very smart man. And what he was saying is that we're not going to get our vaccines for the next 2 years. So we've got to rely on other ways to navigate over the next 2 years. And it's no good putting our lives on hold, pushing that pause button, and hoping that something's going to materialize. We don't want to compromise our children's future. By putting your life on hold, you're putting their life on hold. There are some of us that are pushing that rewind button, living in the past, trying to think of things that happened and what should have happened. There's absolutely no point in pushing that rewind button. So for me, I only know where the play button is. And we've got to move forward. Not fast forward. I wouldn't push it on fast forward. Let's be rational and think about what strategies we can employ to navigate carefully the next 2 years. And remember, these are purely my thoughts. So as a disclaimer, this is the way I perceive things, based on evidence-based medicine, listening to experts, reading research articles. A really interesting research article came out of the Journal of Infectious Diseases that stated that only 4% of household clusters are caused by children. This study took a large number of transmissions that they had detected by household contacts, and only 4%, in fact 3.8%, were as a result of children. And that kind of also tells you something, that children are not the cause of the infections in older people. Yes, they do pick up COVID. They are infectious, but they are a lot less infectious than you ever think. Even today, chatting to some of my patients, and I think a real fear that I also kind of understand is that they kind of say, yes, I get that children are not as affected by COVID. We kind of getting that, we understand that, getting it into our heads that that is not really the problem. But what I'm worried about, if I send my child to school, they're going to pick it up from some other child. They might not be affected and symptomatic, but they're going to come home and they're going to spread it to granny. And I'm worried that my mother or grandmother has serious illness. She's recovering from cancer. She's got high blood pressure. She's got thyroid disease. And how can I live with myself if they got infected? I feel responsible. And what I would say is that the overall risk to older people is not children, it is themselves and adults. The responsibility that we all feel for each other is overwhelming. But we can't let that allow us just to hold that pause button and kind of grip it with fear. I've been absolutely amazed by the schools in Durban, how the leadership that they've provided. And in my opinion, the schools are this island of sanity for children, where they can go, that they can live lives that are and approximate as close to a normality that we can expect for the next 2 years. The way that the teachers and the school have rallied, it's almost as though children are going to the school environments where they're surrounded by plenty of mothers and fathers. Those are the teachers. They specialize in children. That's all they think about. And chatting to some parents who have their children that go to the school that my son went to when he was at junior school, and the absolute amazement how they've taken control of allowing sports to take place, control, giving leadership, reassurance to parents. And what I would say is that the number one thing that you should be doing is listening to the schools, allowing them to provide the leadership. They're getting lots of advice from us. They're getting a lot of information. They are very knowledgeable. And I feel for children, they're going to be that anchor. Most children don't even think about COVID. For them, they start to worry and fear when you and I, as parents, start to allow it to affect us. Switch off that TV. Don't listen to those news cycles. Don't let them dominate your lives. Children watch those things and they see the same cycle go on, and they think that it's the same problem happening again and again. This is where we've got to get control, literally, that self-control of ourselves. And that is going to help our kids the most. And remember that don't forget about the common things that children can suffer from. You know, providing for children during this COVID period is like building a house. You provide the structure. You put the net on the pool. There's a dry roof over your head. There's a security system. There is running water, hot water. But you can't stop the way someone lives in that house. You've got to kind of let them live the lives that they're meant to live. And children, fortunately, have been given almost a pass. Don't let our own insecurities and fears dominate the development of children over this period. Remember things like vaccinations, normal health visits. I've seen children, unfortunately, where problems have been left for 8-9 months, and I've been totally shocked at things that normally parents would not ignore. And these children have unfortunately needed more serious treatment, investigations, and even admission to hospital. So if we can all, I think, use our rational brains, remote controls, collaborate. I myself are doing lots of Zoom consultations. In fact, I'm doing a consultation tomorrow from somebody who lives maybe 200-300 kilometers away, where they can't get access, and conditions like anxiety, depression, learning problems. A lot of the patients that I deal with ADHD, these problems translate very well over Zoom. In fact, I spend a lot longer on the Zoom consultation. I feel the quality of care that I can provide, often I find out a lot more about the family, spend a lot more time. And think about it, children are pretty healthy. The wards are clear. Elsewhere in the world, ICUs and children's wards are being converted into adult wards because there are no children that are sick. It's almost, the irony is that COVID has been a prevention for a lot of other childhood illnesses because of the sanitation, isolation. So please interact, give some feedback, and if you need to contact me, I'm available on Zoom at any point. It's a very, very simple system. Avoids parents having to travel, worry, and we can chat and, if necessary, bring your child in at our remote location at 8 Village Road in Kloof. So I look forward to interacting, and this is where we've got to stick together. We've got to kind of act as a community. This is where everyone has a role to play. And remember, take your finger off that pause button.